We've seen Muslims being blamed for the Leeds riots. We've seen right-wing politicians effectively celebrate and commend the police for kicking and stamping on a Muslim man's head while he was laying down in a prone position. And now we're seeing Muslims being blamed for the stabbing of 3 innocent little girls in Southport. So what on earth is going on? Who is manufacturing this hatred and spreading lies? Is it just some far-right social media influencers like Tommy Robinson or Andrew Tate? Or is there a deeper, more insidious attempt to manufacture hate against Islam and Muslims? And what is the purpose of this? Look, these past few weeks have really surprised me, and I remember the amount of animosity against Islam and Muslims post 9/11, but what I have seen is just blatant lies, discrimination, and well, just pure hatred. Let's take the Leeds riots that took place a few weeks ago. While the area in Leeds had a large Muslim population, it wasn't the Muslims that instigated the riots. It had nothing to do with Muslims, in fact. It was Romanians who had legal residency in Britain who began fighting police over a Romanian family's children being taken into care by social services. They were the ones attacking the police and burning police vans and buses. There may have been other youths that later joined the affray, but the fact remains that the riot and the violence was instigated by Romanians who, by the way, are largely of a Christian background. But that didn't stop some people blaming the Muslims. In fact, we saw Muslims trying to calm the situation down and stopping the violence.
This is our neighbourhood! This is our neighbourhood! Well, don't burn it then!
Yet the claim by far-right non-Muslims was that the police were being too soft on these Muslims. Then a week later, a police officer is seen kicking and stamping on the head of a prone suspect at Manchester Airport. Rather than total condemnation by everyone in society, what we saw is those on the right, including politicians like Lee Anderson, the former Tory member who now represents the Reform Party, and his fellow parliamentarian from the same party, Richard Tice, actually claim the police officer should be praised for what he did.
The message I'm getting loud and clear from my constituents is that they are fed up with seeing police dancing around rainbows and being nice to people and running off from rioters. They want the police to do their job. And I think these police yesterday should be commended. They should, in fact, I'd give them a medal.
Now, I can imagine some saying, yeah, but the fuller video shows that these two were fighting the police. That's not the point. Don't get confused over legitimate and illegitimate use of force by the police. If someone came and attacked me and I dropped that person to the ground and he's no longer a threat, I can't then just go up to him and stamp him on his head. It's simply illegal according to British law. But that didn't stop those on the right, those that have a deep-seated hatred of Muslims, to attempt to justify that finally the police were doing a good thing, that people, or more specifically you Muslims, need to fear the police. You need a good kicking sometimes. Now, just those 2 incidences would have been enough to show the type of hatred being created against Muslims and how they seek to justify egregious acts of violence against Muslims. But what we've recently seen, in the last week or so, is so shocking. It's actually hard to describe how utterly insane things have become. For those who don't know, let me explain. Maybe you've been living under a rock or you just don't follow the UK scene, but a 17-year-old entered a summer dance class of little girls and began stabbing and killing little girls and their teachers. Now that's pretty sick and disgusting, but just like the Leeds riots were being falsely blamed on the Muslims, this too was being blamed on Muslims by the right and also the far right, particularly over social media. Really trying to tap into the fears of the foreigners that the wider society may have. It was claimed that this was a Muslim migrant from Syria that came over in a boat illegally last year and is known to the MI6. And his name, having a distinctly Muslim Arabic characteristic, was Ali al-Shakiti. And as a Muslim, you think, oh man, blooming heck, please tell me this isn't true. And in fact, what I did was I quickly Googled and checked in terms of whether it's true, whether this was his actual identity. And guess what? It was all completely false. It wasn't true at all. In fact, it was pretty much known very early on it was false. The police had already released information that this was a 17-year-old who was born in Cardiff and whose family moved later to Lancashire and whose parents were originally originally from Rwanda, but he himself was born here in Britain. Now, they couldn't release his name because under 18s charged with a crime can't have their identity released unless there's a court order. But how do you go from a 17-year-old born in Cardiff to the fact that he was a Muslim Syrian migrant who came over a boat last year? Then we had the usual suspects, Tommy Robinson and his gang of merry Islamophobes, promoting that we need to take our streets back.
Men will rise up. We're always going to rise up.
You know, like Lee Anderson, MP, who ran a whole campaign claiming we need to take our country back. Even the snake, Andrew Tate, waded in, promoting the idea that this was an illegal migrant, that these are fighting aged men that the British men need to rise up against. These foreigners are killing our pure, innocent daughters.
So an undocumented migrant decided to go into a Taylor Swift dance class today and stab 6 little girls. That's right, somebody arrived in the UK on a boat. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knows where he's from. The media is, of course, hiding the fact that this is a 17-year-old male. They don't want to highlight how ridiculous it is that we allow military-aged males, combatants, to flood our shores. I don't see any protests in the UK. I don't see anybody complaining. Nobody's outside of the school. Nobody's outside the police station. The soul of the Western man is so broken that when the invaders slaughter your daughters, you do absolutely fucking nothing.
Seriously, what a snake he is, promoting these lies. Then we saw, after a vigil for the killed and stabbed children, a riot actually take place. This time not by Romanians in Leeds, but by white British people outside a mosque in Southport. They were burning police cars, throwing bricks and trying to damage the mosque. All based on a lie. Remember, at this time, we already knew he was 17-year-old born in Cardiff to parents who came from Rwanda. Now, I get it. Some of these idiots haven't got a clue where Rwanda is, but Rwanda is not an Arab country. It's a country in Africa, which has over 90% Christian population and only a 2% Muslim population that lives there. So it's pretty clear that what we had known at that time when the riots were taking place outside the mosque, that this person was most likely from a Christian family. Now that the courts have actually officially released his name, we actually know quite a lot about this person. Firstly, his name is Axel Radakubana, and he comes from a devoutly Christian family. He was actually a member of the church choir who was filmed as part of an advert for a BBC commercial, and he also starred in a West End musical. Maybe these far-right miskins should go out protesting outside a musical theatre. It would still make more sense than protesting outside mosques. He has nothing to do with Islam.
The suspect has no known links to Islam.
But to be frank, they don't care that he wasn't a migrant, he wasn't Muslim, he wasn't Arab, and he didn't go to mosque. They probably still hang on to the hope that maybe he converted to Islam or something. You see, this hatred is manufactured, and anyone with a shred of understanding can see that these right-wing shills are not bothered about the truth. They are solely focused on directing public anger towards Muslims. It's manufactured, it's deliberate scaremongering, even if it means making up lies. But really, who has been creating this hatred? Who has been fueling this anti-Muslim hatred? Tommy Robinson is a tool. He nor the EDL, Britain First, or whatever other far-right group are the real cause behind the hatred. They are just useful idiots that promote anti-Muslim hatred to other idiots online. They are paid whores, renter mobs, fascists for hire. The real hatred is coming from those higher up, and are using these people to push an agenda, a political agenda. You see, before October 7th and before the beginning of the genocide in Gaza, the right weren't concerned about Muslims. We had, in fact, people on the right trying to woo the Muslims, people like Jordan Peterson inviting Muslims on his show, Patrick Bet-David trying to call for Muslims to join the right against the progressive left, whom they saw as a bigger threat with their woke culture.
Because this is an area where I feel like, you know, Muslims and Christians can actually be unified in certain areas. And if we do, it's going to be a formidable opponent to go up against. I'm sure they're not going to like this.
You had Andrew Tate famously embrace Islam and trying to claim his anti-woke red pill agenda is best represented by Islam. Yet all this changed post-October 7th. You see, very quickly the ugly side of Zionism was seen, an occupying power undertaking what appeared to be collective punishment and an attempt to ethnically cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. And what really hurt the Western political establishment is that their attempts to provide unstinting support for Israel was just seen as the West providing unstinting support and cover for genocide and colonialism. How did Israel and the Zionists respond? They deliberately undertook a tactic which was to paint any opposition to their genocide as a support for Islamist terrorism. That they were on the front line not only to protect Israel but also Western world from the evils of Islamic terrorism.
This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
That these Muslims are inherently racist, anti-Semitic, they want to take over, they are barbaric who kill and rape innocent girls, even babies. And that if Israel isn't supported against the Palestinians, then Muslims will be emboldened to attack Western capitals against white Westerners. This was the narrative they attempted to paint. The Zionists used their assets like Tommy Robinson, Jordan, Give 'em Hell Peterson, Ollie London, Emily Schrader, amongst others, to fill their social media feeds with anti-Muslim and pro-Zionist, pro-Israel propaganda, painting also the picture that the support for Palestine meant support for Hamas, thus calling pro-Palestinian marches pro-Hamas marches. We know, for instance, that after Tommy Robinson's organisation, English Defence League, the EDL, gained funding from Zionists, it changed its name to English and Jewish Defence League. You can see it from their tax filing accounts. And it wasn't just the Zionists paying these Islamophobic shills and grifters. No, the political establishment in Britain also wanted to shore up public support for government policies towards Israel. Hence, what did we see? People in government like Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, who claimed Islamists are bullying Britain into submission. She also claimed Islamists are now in charge of Britain.
So Suella Braverman has weighed in her inimitable style and said Islamists are in charge of Britain now.
Again, stoking up tensions, claiming that Muslims are taking over. They are radicalizing the white non-Muslims against the Muslims. Michael Gove himself claiming pro-Palestinian marches were linked to extremism and gave rise to anti-Semitism, even though these pro-Palestinian marches were attended by a large number of Jews. And recently, Baron Pearson from the House of Lords gave this speech.
And yet, my lords, if we so much as try just to talk about Islam or Islamism, we are immediately accused of Islamophobia. A phobia is an irrational fear of something, but it isn't irrational to fear the modern world's most violent religious ideology.
Labour have done the same thing. They've agitated the wider public by fear-mongering about Islam. I have a whole video about this, about the Labour Party and how they mainstreamed Islamophobia. And I also have a video on the Tory Party and how they are two sides of the same coin when it comes to the issue of anti-Muslim hatred. The point is the mainstream politicians supported by mainstream media, by like the Daily Mail or the newer news outlets funded by billionaires like GB News or Talk TV, which is funded by Rupert Murdoch, have been stoking up anti-Muslim hatred.
I think he's milking his words. I don't think that is weak and pathetic. I think at this point, the police and our public officers and basically most of the people in authority in the country are now saying Britain doesn't belong to Brits. You are the ones who have to be silenced and censored and be uncomfortable. Now it belongs to a load of people who, frankly, hate you.
Don't believe these mainstream politicians have any concern for Muslims. They're the ones that have created or helped stoke up the tensions in the first place. And now they claim that they're going to come in and help get rid of these far right. You're the ones that created the far right. You're the ones that helped foment the hatred that has caused these riots against mosques to take place and attacks against people of colour. You see, they wanted to undertake the same objectives as they saw in the early 2000s, where Islam and Muslims were demonized to justify Western foreign policy invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq. This hatred that is being fomented by mainstream political figures and effectively the political establishment is there to achieve two objectives. Firstly, to shore up support for the pro-Zionist British policies that they have, and secondly, to distract wider society and the white working class from the failings of their policies, capitalist policies which are there to favour the few while at the same time making you think that the problem is with the immigrants and the Muslims. Look, let me just give you a brief example of this. You think you can't get a GP, a doctor's appointment, or hospital admissions, you know, it's really difficult to get an operation now. You put on a massive waiting list, which is constantly delayed. You think that this problem is because there's just too many people in this country, too many immigrants? You think that's the issue? That the country just simply favors the migrants and immigrants and non-whites, and that's why these white working class people or white general population can't get doctor's appointments anymore. No, it's because the capitalist policies have failed the health system that seeks to underfund the public health system known as the NHS, while attempting to push for more private health companies, because privatization makes more money for the rich capitalist elite. But they can't openly say that, so what they do is they blame immigrants. They talk about migrant boats. They give the impression that the country is too full and there's too many people, and that's the reason why you can't get a doctor's appointment, not because they're underfunding the doctors and the public health. It's all there to fool you, and how easily you, white working class people, have been fooled into hating the wrong people, directing your anger at the wrong people. And on the other hand, you also have Israel and Zionists paying Islamophobes and pro-Zionist shills to demonize Muslims, paying them money, because Zionists believe that while there is hatred for Muslims, there'll be support for the brutal killing of Muslims in Palestine. You see, if you can demonize and dehumanize Muslims, you can use that to justify inhuman acts perpetrated against them in Palestine. Look, there's so much more I'd like to say, but I have to try and keep this video short. But there's a few points I want to leave you with. Firstly, the best way to deal with these far-right mobs, these protesters that are coming to your streets or coming outside of your mosque, is just to leave them. Don't go out there. Don't try to confront them. Why? Because they want to instigate violence. They want to see you react, because when they see you react, then they can point the finger back at you. At the moment, the finger's being pointed at them, thinking everybody's looking at them thinking, what crazy, insane people. This is not the Britain that we want. These far-right mobs with swastikas tattooed on their bodies, going around beating up and fighting against the police and burning up police vans and looting shops, etc. They are alienating themselves. They look like idiots in front of the rest of society. So we shouldn't fall into the trap of confronting them. They want to see the Muslims engage in violence, even if it's understandable, because they want to try to protect their mosque and they're being frustrated. But don't do it, because they're going to use this. The mainstream media will use this. The mainstream politicians, who are the part of the ones who instigated this in the first place, they want to use this to paint the problem as being the Muslims. So don't fall for this trap. Let them directly confront the police and expose the bigotry to the world, because ultimately they'll alienate themselves and people will think, no, this looks stupid. And really, that's what they are. Idiots and stupid people who believe lies off the internet because it feeds their prejudice and racism. Secondly, we should continue to speak out against the genocide taking place in Gaza. We shouldn't be fearful for speaking the truth. Similarly, we shouldn't be fearful about expressing our deen and our Islamic ideas. Just think of the difficulties that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ faced in Mecca, the oppression, the violence, the torture, how the ignorant people of Mecca were being incited to hate Islam and Muslims by the Qurayshi leaders. There are very clear parallels to what we're seeing today. Yet the Prophet ﷺ didn't compromise his deen, didn't hide away from speaking the truth. He continued the dawah, he continued to speak the truth, even if the powerful of society hated it. Thirdly, we need to be a sensible voice that shows to the wider society that the real issue is not Islam or Muslims. That's not the reason why you have problems in this society. It's due to the secular capitalist system that causes the hardships you face, the rise in energy prices, the rise in food prices, the problems in the health services. They're not caused by Islam or Muslims or even migrants on boats. Rather, it's caused by the capitalist system. It favors the rich while neglecting the poor, and then tries to gaslight the population to blame the foreigners. There are good people amongst the non-Muslims who haven't bought into the hate. People came out onto the streets and even helped repair a mosque. We have the potential, therefore, to expose to the wider society, particularly to the good people, the values that we have, our true values, and that we can stand up in terms of, showing the true face of Islam and Muslims against the irrational, thuggish behavior that we have seen amongst the far right, and expose the plans of the political establishment and how they distract the population, as well as expose Israel and their continued genocide and their support for these far right groups that are causing mayhem in the streets of Britain.